Chapter 13. The venue was crowded with people, but no one approached the place where Shi Yan was. So his voice reached Shuyi's ears clearly. She was in a daze for a few seconds, and Shuyi didn't know what Shi Yan suddenly asked her to do. Something he can have asked with her. Until the eyes of the people around fell on Shuyi. He Boming also stretched his neck, showed curiosity, and poked Shuyi's arm. He called you over. Shuyi turned her head to look at him, blinked her eyes, and a thought suddenly popped up from the bottom of her heart like a bean sprout. She continued to look at He Boming, and the little bean sprout was also growing. Finally, his gaze was fixed on the WeChat interface of the mobile phone. Shuyi heard a boom in his head, and the bean sprouts exploded into fireworks. Our feast. He no. Shu, clothes. Up he. Eat vinegar. Up he. Acid up. After Shuyi rolled 3 times happily in his mind, he straightened his hair, stepped on high heels, and walked towards the gate of the infield step by step in a dignified manner. When she reached out to push the door, her joyful smile was genuine. She is so happy now. If she hadn't considered the wrong occasion, she would have rolled 3 more times on the spot. The infield lounge and the outfield seem to be 2 worlds. The windows are bright and clean, and the whole room is illuminated with only sunlight. Several sofas were placed one after another, the floor was covered with soft carpets, and around the table stood a few young men and women, dressed in formal attire, holding iPads and folders in their hands, whispering in secret. Apart from their whispering, there was no other sound in the room. Shuyi caught up with Shi Yan and asked, "What do you want from me?" Shi Yan didn't speak immediately. He pointed to the sofa behind Shuyi. "Sit." Shuyi still sat down and looked at him expectantly. "Quick, say you are jealous." Shi Yan lowered his head, his eyes lightly swept over her face. He looked at Shuyi, but didn't speak. Shuyi was a little anxious. There was an unconcealable smugness on his face, and those eyes looked over, and he could see the thoughts in his heart at a glance. "Why did you call me here?" Shi Yan raised his eyelids and said casually, "Where's the female reporter next to you?" Shuyi blinked his eyes, as if he didn't understand. Shi Yan repeated, "The female reporter who came with you." Shuyi froze, feeling her temples twitching twice. The nerves were tense, and then when she understood what Shi Yan meant, it broke suddenly. "Did you call her here to inquire about Shuyi? It turned out that just now. Is it really Shuyi?" Shuyi took a deep breath. Grinding her teeth, "Oh, I'll call her for you." Hearing her words, Shi Yan raised his eyebrows. Shuyi slowly took out his cell phone, turned his back to Shi Yan, and tried his best to look as if he had no flaws. She was afraid that she would tremble with anger. Without Shuyi's WeChat, Shuyi dialed her directly. Shuyi was in the coffee shop outside the venue at the moment. There were quite a few people around, but the overall environment was clean and quiet. Sitting on a high stool without being disturbed, she played with her mobile phone for more than half an hour and felt much more comfortable. It would be nice to just stay like this until the end of the press conference. Unexpectedly, Shuyi suddenly called. Shuyi's heartbeat suddenly accelerated, and even her scalp began to tingle. Could it be that they want to arrest her and bring her back to the press conference? "Hello." Shuyi was about to speak, but the words reached his throat, hesitated a few times, and then said, "Xiaoya, where are you?" "Just outside the cafe." Shuyi paused, and added, "I didn't leave, it's just that it's too stuffy inside." "Oh, you've already left. It's okay, don't bother." "Well, take a good rest, then I'll hang up." Shuyi exhaled lightly, and when he turned around again, he had an expression of "You see, I can't help it. Mr. She has already left." "Shi Yan, where did you go?" You don't care where they go." Shuyi, "She is not feeling well and has gone home." When he said this, Shuyi's expression was very exciting. He was obviously very angry, but he had to pretend to be calm. Shi Yan looked out the window, the sun was glaring, he squinted his eyes to hide a smile. "What's wrong with her?" It's none of your business." Shuyi wanted to say that he didn't know, but the more he thought about it, the more angry he became, and he couldn't help it. "She has president phobia. She can't breathe when she sees someone as big as you. Chest tightness and shortness of breath. Nauseous." Shuyi put his hands behind his back, raised his chin, and said confidently, "I'm different. I'm delighted to see you." Overjoyed. Joyful. At this time, Qin knocked on the door and leaned in. "Mr. Shi, the press conference continues." Shi Yan glanced at his watch, and when he went out, his eyes lightly swept over Shuyi, not knowing what it meant. Another hour passed, and Shuyi hadn't returned yet. Shuyi was not surprised by this result. Now her mind is full of the few questions that Shi Yan just asked. He booming next to her talked to her a few times, but she didn't notice at all, and just stared at the computer blankly. Until the end of the press conference, the final interview stage. The reporters all flocked up, and the microphones were densely packed in front of the rostrum. In the auditorium, Shuyi's lonely figure seemed very abrupt. She was silent, her eyes were drooping, her mouth was squinting, and she was very suspicious of life. Could it be that she took the cannon fodder female supporting script? She deliberately seduced her, but in the end Shi Yan was attracted by the reluctant Shuyi. Friends doesn't write stories like this now, okay? When she recovered, she stood up and looked towards the rostrum. Among the dark crowd of people, there was no longer any figure of Shi Yan. I don't know when everyone ran away. Shuyi stood sullenly for a while, then walked out with her bag. With the posture of the rostrum, she must not be able to squeeze in. So at this moment, she was almost the only one who left the meeting place, and the outside was still very empty, with almost no one around. Because of this, Shuyi saw Shi Yan at a glance, and Shuyi, who was standing opposite him. There was no sun today, and the wind was very strong and cold. Shuyi almost fell into a coma on the spot. She didn't expect that fate would really love to tease her so much. In broad daylight, there were so many reporters in the venue. Shi Yan actually stood on the square in such a grandiose manner to seduce women. Return want. No want. Noodle son. Up you. At once, this. What, lack. Female people. In the empty square, a gust of wind blew, and the leaflets scattered on the ground were rolled up and fluttered down on the legs of the two. Shuyi saw Shuyi's hair raised from a distance, and the two whispered in the wind. After a while, the two finished chatting. Shuyi nodded, turned and walked towards her car. Shi Yan didn't seem to care much about her back, turned around and walked in the opposite direction. Shuyi stood on the steps, staring at the scene. Far away, Shuyi couldn't see Shi Yan's expression clearly, and didn't know what to say. She was afraid that as soon as she opened her mouth, she wanted to ask herself why she was so miserable. Shi Yan walked a few steps, paused, and then turned his head to look over. The moment their eyes met, Shuyi turned around and left. No matter what, it was quite embarrassing to run into Shi Yan at this time. Only the sound of whistles in the distance and the sound of the wind blowing through the buildings can be heard in the square, so it is a very quiet environment. But Shuyi didn't hear footsteps behind him at all. Time to feast on him and leave. She slowed down and turned her head slowly. Shi Yan didn't leave, he was still standing there, but he didn't know when his car had stopped behind him. He was half leaning against the car, with broad shoulders and long legs, and his figure was neatly trimmed by a suit. It's just that his expression is not so serious, and he is looking at Shuyi lazily. Depend on, Shuyi felt like he was fishing. No, the script doesn't work that way. Shuyi withdrew his gaze, as if he hadn't seen him, and continued to walk forward. As she walked, she was thinking about what Shi Yan meant. The man didn't leave, but stood there looking at her without making a sound, as if waiting for her to take the initiative to turn around. Impossible, don't even think about it. But as soon as she had the idea of fighting for breath, her footsteps stopped suddenly. Why is there a one at the end of this passage? Blocking wall. There are copper walls and iron walls in the front, and there are banquets in the back. Shuyi stood there in a daze, motionless. I don't know how long it has passed, and finally there are unhurried footsteps behind him. Then, the voice of Shi Yan came. What are you doing standing here? Shuyi, pray for blessings. After a brief silence, the voice sounded again. Gone. Shuyi, walk slowly. She still looked at the wall, stubbornly. Until the wrist was suddenly pulled. I'll walk you home. Chapter 14. Shuyi felt that as long as he had a little bit of backbone, he should sternly reject Shi Yan at this time. Who wants you to send it? Do I have no legs? Didn't you have a great time striking up a conversation just now? But when she turned around, she saw Shi Yan's face, as well as the car behind, immediately changed his mind. In the end, Shuyi got into Shi Yan's car with the mood of enduring humiliation and sacrificing courage. A small leak will sink a great ship. But she was still very angry, sitting on the edge, looking out of the window, facing Shi Yan with the back of her head. I text you and you don't reply. I give you rainbow farts and you get angry. And instead you go to hook up with a woman who sweats from nervousness when she sees you. Am I not beautiful enough? Am I not trying hard enough? Or do CEOs like women? Are you afraid of me? Boring. Shuyi was so angry that he breathed heavily and wrote. But after thinking about it, what position does he have to be angry here? Shuyi sighed, the annoyance on his face quietly disappeared, his eyebrows and eyes drooped. She is the one who is fighting for, not Shi Yan. Well, then just swallow this sullen breath for now. Shuy's face was reflected in the car window. Every expression was like a movie projection, changing frame by frame on the glass. Shi Yan watched helplessly as she was angry for a while, frowning for a while, and entangled for a while. He turned his eyes, and when he looked in the rearview mirror, he smiled slightly. Several minutes passed. Shuyi convinced himself thoroughly. She turned her head slowly, and took a peek at Shi Yan. The man took off his glasses at some point, lowered his eyes, and looked at his phone. The afterglow came in from the front window, and the dark light and shadow floated on his face, making his outline more profound. Since getting in the car, Shi Yan has been silent, and has no intention of communicating with Shuyi, as if he really just wanted to send her home. Shuyi moved closer to him calmly, then hesitated, thinking about what to say. After getting inspiration, Shuyi tapped his chin with his index finger, and was about to speak cautiously when Shi Yan's cell phone rang suddenly. She shut up immediately. Hearing what Shi Yan said on the phone seemed to be about work, she silently began to move into the corner again. Sensing her move, Shi Yan changed his hand to hold the phone, leaned his elbow on the car window, and looked sideways. Shuyi fell into his sight. She lowered her eyes, not knowing what she was thinking. The light wind from the air conditioner in the car can also blow the hair around her cheeks. A few strands of soft hair were floating, trembling with her eyelashes. Frowning for a while, stretching for a while, the passing lights on the road made her face flicker. Mr. Shi, the person on the other end of the phone suddenly asked, "Are you listening?" Shi Yan withdrew his gaze. "You continue." The phone call was very long, and it didn't end until the car stopped at the gate of the community where Shuyi lived. After Shi Yan hung up the phone, there was no sound beside him. He turned around and saw Shuyi leaning on the back chair with his head tilted to one side and his eyelashes trembling slightly. Fell asleep again. Also slept soundly. In a daze, Shuyi didn't know what he dreamed of, frowned, and slowly fell to the side. Just when she was unsteady, Shi Yan suddenly reached out and grabbed her side face. Her base makeup is very light, without the greasy feeling of powder. The skin touched by the palm is delicate and soft, and a little warm. Shi Yan moved his hands and helped her back to her original position. When she was about to pull her palm away, she murmured a few words. "The lips are rosy and full, and you can smell a sweet and greasy taste with your eyes." Shi Yan's thumb moved, and it lightly brushed across her lips. When Shuyi slowly opened his eyes, his consciousness was still a little fuzzy. She rubbed her neck and slowly sat up straight. When she caught a glimpse of Shi Yan beside her from the corner of her eye, her hands froze and she woke up instantly. At that moment, regret, speechlessness, boredom, several emotions came to my heart instantly. Why fell asleep again? What a chance to be alone in the car. So missed. Shuyi was annoyed and rubbed his forehead. "Have you been waiting for me long? Why don't you wake me up?" After she finished speaking, she saw Shi Yan's eyes, so she silently swallowed the last sentence. Shi Yan's eyes seemed to say, "Do you know how precious my time is? Don't be too sentimental, okay?" Sure enough, Shi Yan said indifferently, "Not long." Shuyi didn't know what to say, and his movements became very slow. There was silence in the car for a few seconds. Until Shi Yan said, "If you don't get out of the car, you plan to live here." Shuyi, if possible. Shi Yan interrupted her. "Shuyi, I'm very busy." After Ma Lu got out of the car, Shuyi pulled the car door and smiled at him. "Then thank you for taking me home, I'll go first." Shuyi stood by the side of the road, watching the taillights of the car flickering, and one thing gradually became clear in his mind. Just now in the car, she heard the driver ask where Shi Yan was going. The place where Shi Yan was going was not on the same road as her house. He was very busy and even sent her home specially. So, is Shi Yan's behavior coaxing her? Knowing that she was upset seeing him flirting with Qin Shiyue, so coaxing her. Right, that is it. Thinking of this, Shuyi couldn't hide his smile. Her happiness was so obvious, her walking pace became brisk, and she even took the initiative to say hello when she met a neighbor who was usually very annoying. But this joy was maintained until she entered the door. Press the combination lock with your fingers, and there is a beep, as if the brain's IQ switch button rang. She held the doorknob, stunned for a moment. Shi Yan accosted Qin Shuyi and then came to coax her again. Damn, the scumbag wants to step on two boats. Fuck, Shuyi was so angry that his 7 orifices smoked. She slammed the door hard, stepped into the living room in 2 or 3 steps, threw her bag on the sofa, and then paced back and forth with her arms folded, her steps hurried. I'm mad, I'm mad, I'm mad. As she was walking, she tripped over the foot of the sofa. The moment she fell, she stopped struggling and fell directly into the soft sofa. Lying down, staring at the ceiling with open eyes, Shuyi grabbed a pillow and pressed it against his chest, trying to give himself psychological counseling. I thought silently, actually, I am not a good person. Right, that is it. What pot with what cover it? Shuyi let out a breath, turned over, and stared at the ground for a few times. With a bang, she threw the pillow and knocked down a photo frame. Although I have ulterior motives for you, I didn't flirt with others at the same time. I'm going to give you my heart and soul, okay? Very specific, okay. That night, the second signature pen, presented by Mingyu Bank, was broken. The next day, everyone in the office could feel that Shuyi was not in a good mood. The specific manifestation is that when we met in the conference room, I felt cold, and when I met in the tea room, I felt cold. Even when I met her in the bathroom, it seemed like she was here to do scientific research tasks. At the weekly meeting in the afternoon, all departments participated, and the editor-in-chief said something. Shuyi's Shi Yan interview draft has been published and sold, the sales volume has doubled, and the reading volume of the electronic version has skyrocketed. The content of this article is open and closed, precise and sharp, and has aroused great repercussions in the circle. There was warm applause in the meeting room, no matter if it was true or false, it gave Shuyi enough face. But her smile wasn't really happy either. It's the same, but in the busy day, no one has time to care about her emotions except for her close colleagues. Only Qin Shuyi was sitting at the workstation, and vaguely heard Shuyi poking the bottom of the cup with a spoon when he was making coffee. He was still chanting in bits and pieces, with a bad tone, but none of the sentences contained the word time banquet. It has to be said that Qin Shuyi was a little shocked. Her little uncle is so defensive, what did Shuyi do to make Shuyi hate him so much? Qin Shuyi frowned slightly. Isn't the banquet a little overdue? But some people don't know if their nerves are not very sensitive, or they deliberately bumped into the muzzle of the gun. In the afternoon, Kong Nan went out for an interview. Su Yuling walked to Shuyi's side and took Kong Nan's seat. Shuyi, what happened to you today? I feel like you're not happy. I should be happy to write a big red article. Let's celebrate with dinner tonight. She spoke in a moderate voice, even Qin Shuyi could hear her clearly, but Shuyi was still typing on the computer, motionless, as if she didn't hear her. Su Yuling's complexion was not very good, and he continued, I heard that you broke up with your boyfriend, is it because you are in a bad mood? In fact, Shuyi didn't deliberately hide her breakup. Some colleagues had asked Yu Xingzhou not to pick her up recently, so her breakup is not a secret among close colleagues. It is not surprising that it spread, but Shuyi still ignored Su Yuling. Qin Shuyi was concentrating on playing with her mobile phone, but when she heard this, she couldn't help but sneered softly. Although Shuyi hated her when he ignored her, it was inexplicably funny to see Su Yuling being ignored with his obvious gossip-like appearance. Here, Su Yuling became impatient and knocked on Shuyi's table vigorously. Shuyi, I'm talking to you. Shuyi suddenly came back to his senses and looked up at Su Yuling. Later, Qin Shuyi saw her brush her hair and take off the 2 wireless earphones. Are you talking to me? Shuyi's tone was quite polite. I'm wearing noise-canceling headphones, the frequency is turned up, and I'm more focused. I can't hear you, sorry. Su Yuling's face was not very good-looking, but she still smiled stiffly. It's nothing, I care about you, seeing that you are in a bad mood today. I want to ask if you broke up with your boyfriend. When Shuyi heard this, his face changed like the sky. Looking her up and down, he said coldly, what's none of your business? The tone of this sentence was too aggressive, more or less colleagues around heard it, and the atmosphere at the scene suddenly became very stiff. Su Yuling's face darkened, and she didn't know how to answer the conversation. Shuyi ignored her, put on the earphones, and started writing the manuscript again. Su Yuling's face turned pale in the delicate atmosphere around him. However, Shuyi continued typing as if nothing had happened, and she had nowhere to vent her anger, so she could only stride away with her hands shaken. The closest onlooker at the scene, Shuyi, didn't pay attention to Su Yuling's expression when he left. Her mind was full of the headphones Shuyi was wearing, and began to think back on the first day at work. She called Shuyi several times, but the other party ignored her. Is it because the earphones did not hear her? The more I think about it, the more I think it is. Looking back on the details of their relationship during this period, although Shuyi was not very enthusiastic about her, he was still kind and did not seek her out. Pushing it backwards, it seems that he is not the kind of arrogant person. So, it seems that she really misunderstood. In fact, it's okay to misunderstand. The point is, she sold out badly with Shi Yan. Shi Yan seems to have made Shuyi miserable again. Shuyi scratched her head, once again caught in a difficult life situation. Now that she knows that her misunderstanding has caused Shuyi harm, it is impossible for her to feel guilty. But all her life, because of her status and background, she has always stood at the top, and she has never bowed her head to anyone other than her elders. It is even more impossible for her to suddenly speak out about what she has done. It was night, after Shuyi got off work. She went to the barber shop to have her hair trimmed, and then ate out again. When I got home at night and took a shower, it was already 11:30 at night. When she was applying the mask, she subconsciously took out her phone, and when she found the text message box, she hesitated. I didn't send it this morning because she was so angry, but after a whole day of mental adjustment, she began to waver again. Think about it in another place. As Party B, it is normal for Party A to have multiple choices. How can Party B blame Party A for shopping around? After figuring it out, Shuyi regained his vitality, and immediately sent 4 short messages to Shi Yan. No good night today. Because I'm very disturbed. I can't sleep now. If you add me on WeChat, I can fall asleep. I didn't wait for Shi Yan's response. Shuyi thought about it for a while, and he might have to use some strong medicine. Actually, it's because I left something in your place again. Did you see it QAQ? After sending these text messages, Shuyi decided to hold out hope and wait for a reply. But waiting was too tedious, so she simply started tidying up the room. When she was clearing the cabinet, she saw 2 tickets for Song Lilan's concert. This ticket was originally bought by her to go with Yu Xingzhou at the time, but now things are different. This ticket is a pity. But when he saw what was written on the ticket stub, it would be 7 o'clock tomorrow night, Shuyi blinked, and a bold idea popped up. She remembered that Shi Yan also had Song Lilan's album at home. Then if they can go to the concert together, it will be a qualitative leap for the progress of the relationship. Shuyi squatted on the ground, looking at the 2 tickets. Countless ideas had begun to germinate. At this time, the mobile phone beside the table rang. Shuyi grabbed the phone and quickly glanced at the screen. The lock screen prompts that a text message of illiterate who can't type is received. Shuyi's heart suddenly beat twice. The TD in the dream had caused too much psychological shadow on her, and at this moment, she actually had a wonderful feeling similar to being close to the hometown. She was afraid that Shi Yan would really reply her with a TD, so she would rather receive spam messages. After preparing for the worst, Shuyi turned on the screen. Illiterate who can't type, falling again. Call. Shuyi's dangling heart finally fell to the ground. If it wasn't TD. She smiled and typed, well, it's more important than the dowry last time. The illiterate who can't type, what? Shuyi, it's my heart, ////////. The other side didn't return directly. Shuyi, she touched her cheek, annoyed again. Is it too much? I really don't know how to save the situation. Shuyi plans to ask other friends for advice. She opened WeChat, stared at the interface of the address book, and when she was thinking about who to find, a red one suddenly popped up in the column of new friends. As if telepathically, Shuyi clicked on it immediately, and saw that it was a WeChat friend application called SY Lucky. And, time banquet. End at. Add superior. Micro letter. Up. I just didn't expect that Shi Yan was quite girly, and the suffix behind it was so coquettish. The profile picture is normal, a normal photo of a corgi. So he didn't make a fuss about the banquet just now, and he seems to be quite fond of it. Shuyi held his mobile phone and happily sent him a message. I finally waited until you added me on WeChat. Circle.jpg. After a while. SY Lucky. She was lying on the bed, her legs were swaying, and she was shaking her head. Shuyi, are you going to sleep? SY Lucky, it's still early. Shuyi smiled, and immediately took a photo of a concert ticket and sent it to Shi Yan. Shuyi, I saw this just now, and I am wondering who to go with. "Sy lucky, Shuyi, are you free tomorrow night?" It took a while for the other party to reply. "Sy lucky, yes." Shuyi smiled and pinched the pillow with his hands. "Shuyi, then shall we go together tomorrow night?" Another moment of waiting. Chapter 15. Shuyi did not expect to make an appointment for the banquet so smoothly. It was as unreal as a dream. By the next morning, she still felt a little unreal. After opening her eyes, she relaxed on the bed for a while, then took out her mobile phone and poked into Shi Yan's circle of friends. Oh well, it's only visible for 3 days. But that's also his style. Shuyi sat up happily and sent him a message while washing. "Shuyi, good morning." Shuyi, comparing hearts.jpg. At 11 o'clock, the other party replied, "Good morning. Hey, it's still late." Shuyi, don't forget about the concert tonight. Sy lucky, the concert started at 7 p.m., and Shuyi originally wanted to send another message to ask Shi Yan if he wanted to have dinner together. But if you think about it, if you make a monthly profit, you will lose. So she started to put on makeup early, picked out clothes for a long time, and even wore a pair of newly bought high heels. Go outside feeling refreshed. Just arrived at 6 o'clock, before the twilight, the setting sun was hanging obliquely in the sky, and the ground was covered with fallen leaves. But the entrance of the gymnasium where the concert was held was already crowded with people, and it was very lively. There are many carpet sellers in the square selling all kinds of gadgets, such as hand banners, foam lamps, fluorescent sticks, and various headbands. Shuyi went shopping for a while, but didn't buy anything else, but paid special attention to some cartoon headbands. According to the law of idol dramas, it is best to use cute headbands. If she can fool Shi Yan and put on the headband with her again, then her little aunt's great career will be just around the corner. Shuyi realized that scene, wanted to laugh, but also looked forward to it, and carefully selected 2 Mickey Mouse headbands. The square was very windy, so she gathered her scarf and found a corner to stand and wait for the banquet. At the concert, there are groups of friends or lovers in pairs. A lonely figure like Shuyi is relatively rare and quite conspicuous. She stood and looked at the time after a while, trying to remind the time banquet, but repeatedly held back. Until 6:30, the staff began to arrange for the audience to line up to enter the venue, but the banquet had not yet arrived. Shuyi sent a message to urge him, and walked out of the gate at the same time. As soon as she stood on the side of the road, a Porsche slowly stopped in front of her. For this kind of flamboyant car, it is estimated that there is only a banquet. Shuyi laughed immediately, and when the car door opened, a slender leg stretched out. On the legs, wearing boots. Shuyi blinked and watched Shuyi get off the car. She carried her bag, took off her sunglasses, looked at Shuyi, and smiled inexplicably. Shuyi didn't expect Shuyi to come too. But it's nothing unusual, after all, Song Leland is popular. Shuyi also smiled at her. What a coincidence. Skillful. Shuyi was puzzled. Didn't you invite me here? Shuyi, I date you. Have I dated you yet? My appointment is obviously a time banquet. Wait, time banquet. At that moment, Shuy's mind was like a comet hitting the earth, destroying her soul. Fortunately, she stabilized her emotions in a very short time, and quickly reacted. Everything suddenly revealed its clues amidst the chaos. Time banquet. It is also time and month. It turned out that the person she excitedly met with last night was Shuyi. Haha, what a coincidence. What a fucking coincidence. Shuyi supported his forehead, forced a smile, and said, yes, I mean I just urged you, and you will arrive. Oh, Shuyi felt that Shuyi seemed to be a little abnormal, but couldn't figure out why, so she could only smile awkwardly. Speaking of which, she was also very confused last night. Shuyi was not a familiar person. After she asked the editor-in-chief for Shuy's WeChat account, she was really thinking about what to say, but the other party greeted her warmly, as if she knew who she was. Then he took the initiative to ask her to come to the concert. Although Shuyi was very surprised, she suddenly remembered that Shuyi had indeed mentioned this concert in the office a few days ago. At that time, she said that she had an extra ticket and asked Kong Nan if she wanted to go with her. Kong Nan originally agreed, but yesterday she had a temporary interview task. Before leaving, I told Shuyi, and Shuyi was quite disappointed. Therefore, Shuyi accepted Shuy's invitation without thinking too much. The on-site order was well managed, and the two entered the venue smoothly. Until halfway through the concert, the two of them didn't communicate much. They sat quietly, occasionally waving the light sticks, revealing a subtle embarrassment throughout the whole process. Although the reasons for embarrassment vary, they are all out of tune with the carnival of the rest of the audience. During the period, Shuyi didn't listen to the songs very seriously, and his mind was full of things about Shi Yan. At a certain moment, she couldn't hold back, and reluctantly took out her phone to take a look. Well, it's really Shuyi, not Shi Yan. Shi Yan to die. At the same time, she raised her head and saw Song Leland singing on a suspended swing, her eyes drifting towards them. Song Leland is singing a Japanese song. I once thought about it too. Shuyi couldn't understand the lyrics, but felt that it was too miserable. This song really sounded too miserable, but not as bad as her. The atmosphere at the scene gradually became thicker, and many audience members cried. And Song Leland kept looking at Shuyi's direction, which made her feel as if Song Leland sang this song just for her. After the emotion sank, Shuyi unknowingly felt the tip of his nose sore, as if he was about to burst into tears in the next second. Shuyi secretly looked at Shuyi several times, and always felt that there was something weird about her. After a song passed, Shuyi finally couldn't bear it anymore and asked, "What's wrong with you? Are you in a bad mood?" Shuyi turned his head and stared at her intently. As the atmosphere at the scene became more and more heated, Shuyi wanted to release his emotions amidst the screams around him. It happened to be Shuyi next to her, and she didn't know why. Facing this unfamiliar in turn, she inexplicably felt the desire to confide. "You know, I just broke up not long ago." Shuyi nodded blankly. "I've heard a little bit." The air conditioner was turned on in the gymnasium, and the air was not circulating. Shuyi sniffed and spoke with a nasal voice. "He has been chasing me for a long time. At that time, everyone thought that he had to be me, but not long after we got together, he cheated at 180 degrees. Shuyi opened her eyes wide and took a deep breath. It's hard to imagine that someone like Shuyi would be green. That mistress isn't very good looking either. Shuyi, then why? Shuyi, isn't it because that Xiaosan's family is rich, and he has an amazing little uncle? Shuyi went on to talk about how they swaggered through the market, how the mistress performed in front of her in a lot of words, and Shuyi and her shared the same hatred and repeatedly slapped her thighs. My God, this kind of person suggests amputation below the eyebrows. Yes, yes. When the mood came, Shuyi even uttered the secret in his heart, "So I can't swallow this breath, I won't let them have a better life. It just so happened that her little uncle seemed to be interested in me at first, so I'll go and get rid of him." Their little aunt. Shuyi nodded repeatedly, his tone excited. "Yes, get her little uncle. Be her little aunt. If you don't do it, you are not Chinese. Sister Shuyi, let's go." When the concert was coming to an end, a surprise guest appeared, the popular little fresh meat with countless girlfriend fans. This was unexpected by all the audience. The moment they appeared on the stage, the audience screamed, and even Shuyi was dumbfounded. After the two songs ended, Xiao Xianro stepped down, and Shuyi was still restless. She looked around, her eyes flickering, and finally stared in the direction of the backstage for a few seconds, and then said, "Sister Shuyi, my friend just sent me a message and asked me for something. I have to go first." Shuyi was immersed in the atmosphere, and waved to her, "Then be careful on the road." Shuyi put on her sunglasses, stooped and walked out. So in the end, Shuyi listened to the concert alone. It was almost 12 o'clock when the encore ended and everyone left. The entire road outside the gate of the gymnasium was so congested that it was difficult to get a car. Shuyi waited for a long time. The main road was finally cleared, and the vehicles could move slowly. So she walked to the side of the road to get into the car. The surroundings had returned to silence. Shuyi took a few breaths of heat into his palms, and leaned forward to look outside. After repeated several times, she didn't see the car she asked for, but instead saw a very eye-catching sports car. Shuyi's gaze gradually fixed, and he could no longer move his eyes away. Through the windshield, she could also recognize the person in the car as Shi Yan. The traffic flow was slow, and Shi Yan had one hand on the steering wheel, with an indifferent expression, as if he didn't care about everything in the outside world. But the moment he raised his eyes, a figure appeared in his peripheral vision. He glanced over. Shuyi was walking towards him step by step. Suddenly, Shuyi staggered accidentally. "The new shoes don't fit well, and the heels are too thin. I didn't notice it when I was sitting, but now it's obvious when I walk. It was just a slight sprain just now, but at that moment, Shuyi had a flash of inspiration, and an idea of touching porcelain was born. So she looked at the other person directly, tiptoed 1 foot, and then stood there without moving. Because she knew that Shi Yan saw her. And he shouldn't just ignore her like that. Sure enough, the car drove forward slowly and stopped when it passed by her side. The car window was lowered. Shi Yan bent his arms, propped his chin on the back of his hand, looked sideways at Shuyi, and didn't speak. The two just looked at each other like this, as if they were waiting for the other to speak first. A few seconds later, Shuyi curled his lips and said aggrievedly, "Mr. Shi, I sprained my ankle." Shi Yan still looked at her indifferently, waiting for more. "Shuyi, it's all because of you." She took another step forward, getting closer to the car. "You are responsible for me." Shi Yan raised his head slowly, resting his temples on the back of his hand, and casually looked at Shuyi. "It's not my business. Shuyi, when I see you, I can no longer look at the road. The car in front has already driven away, and the traffic behind is honking." Shi Yan snorted lightly, and while looking away, the car sped away. Shuyi, this return. Yes, individual. People. Shuyi was so angry that he immediately stood up straight, stomped his feet, folded his arms, but didn't know what to do for a moment. It happened that the driver called and said that it was not convenient to park here, and told her to walk to the intersection. She had to go forward. As I was walking, my foot suddenly stepped on the air. Shuyi stared, but before he realized what happened, a sharp pain hit his ankle. She suddenly fell to the side, but fortunately a passing girl rushed up to support her. "Are you okay?" "No, nothing. Heaven's retribution." The girl continued to cross the road, while Shuyi stood and moved her feet, causing her to twitch in pain. But there was no way, the driver didn't come in, so she could only limp and curse. The traffic lights ahead. Shi Yan watched this scene in the rearview mirror. He raised his head, tapped the steering wheel with his fingers, and then turned around at the intersection. The road seemed endless. Shuyi was wearing high heels and shuffled along while walking, cursing and swearing. "Shi Yan, you have no heart. The eyesight is 1,500. Without conscience, heartless and righteous. Am I not beautiful? Am I not cute? Do those eyes avoid beautiful people? Just donate it to the hot pot restaurant. It's really a fool who has been reincarnated several times." Suddenly, her forehead twitched, and her step stopped inexplicably. The surrounding atmosphere doesn't seem right. Pulled by a certain consciousness, she slowly turned her head. The roadside was less than half a meter away from her. Shi Yan's car window was down to the bottom, and he was looking at her deeply. "Shuyi," she swallowed. "I think I can get in the car and explain. What do you think?"
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to our channel for more captivating illustrated romance audiobooks. Don't miss out on our latest releases and be part of our growing community. Hit that subscribe button and embark on an enchanting journey with us.